Welcome to Capital Gains, Yahoo Finance's unique look at how U.S. government policy could impact your bottom line. I'm your host, Madison Mills. This week, tariffs front and center as a trade war kicking off in earnest between the U.S., Canada, Mexico, and China. Though Trump's tariffs went into effect this week, the president did announce some exemptions and delays on some of them. We'll get into what all of this means for you and your bottom line. But first, let me welcome in my co-hosts. Hello, Rick and Ben. How's it going, guys?
Hello, Ben and Maddie.
Hello, guys. All right, Ben, let's kick it off with you. What's on the note cards this week?
So my note card is, you already mentioned it, the exemptions. We're a couple days in, so we are in exemption season. It's three giant carve-outs. We're not quite into Oprah territory, but we're close. It's everyone gets an exemption. You get an exemption. You get an exemption. Three big ones are in place right now as we tape this. There could be more by the time anyone hears this. The first is the big one with Mexico. Donald Trump announced that sort of all USMCA compliant goods will not have a tariff for this month, at least up until April 2nd. That's a huge swath of goods and a big walk back from the president on that. That's paired with a 1-month pause on auto tariffs. That's from both Mexico and Canada that Trump announced yesterday. That's another 30-day pause. And then the third one, which he'd announced previously, was about Canadian oil, the 10% rate on Canadian oil as opposed to 25%. All this is to say, Trump announced these tariffs, or he went forward with these tariffs on Tuesday. In the immediate days, the kind of economic costs of them became very evident, and there's a sort of, the CEOs and business leaders were, getting to anyone they could at the White House, and they're clearly getting through in the sense that there certainly has to be a walk back so far. The question is what this looks like in a month when the big tariffs are in place.
Ben, I saw what you did there with your note card. So you've had tariffs on your note card so many times that you had to come up with something that is about tariffs, but doesn't say the word tariff. So it's exemptions. Okay, I have a quiz question for the panel. You guys ready?
Ooh, pop quiz.
How do you qualify to get an exemption from a Trump tariff? Does anybody know?
This is what I've been asking you both all week, is how you get the exemption.
There's one answer, in my opinion, and that's having Trump's phone number. That's the big element of this. Really underway here. It's how the auto tariffs happened, is that Jim Farley was able to get on the phone with the president and make his case directly. And you're seeing that on a lot of these. I would say that a lot of this is personal. It's like whether you can make the directly to Trump, that he can do it. So there's multiple answers, but that's my one.
Okay, so I think there's another requirement, which is you have to soften up Trump somehow. Who knows how? Because I think Justin Trudeau, the Canadian Prime Minister, I think he has Trump's phone number, doesn't he? I mean, do we know? Okay, let's assume he does. Let's assume he does, or he can like find somebody who can help him get Trump's phone number. He's been talking to Trump, and Trump did not give Canada the same level of exemptions that he gave to Mexico. I think that's just because Trump doesn't like Trudeau. He thinks he's kind of punkish. And apparently, Claudia Sheinbaum, the Mexican president, she's new. Trump doesn't know her so much. She's gotten off on the right foot with Trump, and Trudeau has this, awkward history with Trump. So, isn't this a great way to run the economy, guys? Like maybe the Honda Civic is going to cost 25% more because it comes from Canada, but maybe it's not. I mean, so I just looked up some automobiles where they're made. The Honda Civic is made in Canada. The Nissan Sentra is made in Mexico. They compete with each other. So I think what this means is that the Honda Civic is now going to be subject to a 25% tariff, but a competing product, the Nissan Sentra, is not going to be subject to it, which means Honda, just by virtue of some decision it made probably 20 years ago to locate production in Canada, is going to have to eat that cost. But that's only for a month. Probably tomorrow, the next day, we'll get some new exemptions. It's a really efficient way to run an economy.
It's been so hard to cover this week. And I mean, you guys are seasoned pros. You've covered this administration previously, but the tariff policy keeps shifting so fast. Every time I finish a video explaining how your car could get $12,000 more expensive, car tariffs, they're not actually happening. So that video gets thrown in the trash. But guys, I was just wondering, why do you think the tariffs are Trump's Roman Empire this time around? Why is this the thing that he can't stop thinking about and acting on?
Ben, I'll let you take a first stab at this.
Sure. I mean, but answer that is that tariffs are Trump's answer to kind of every question, and they can't be the question to answer to everything. And what you've seen it when you hear Trump talk about it, is it's a way to raise revenue, it's a way to get what he wants on the negotiating stage, it's a way to sort of have America first, and it can't be all those things at once. That's the other sort of frustration for me about covering this is sort of what exactly are these? What is the goal here of tariffs? Because at different times, even in the same speech from Trump or from Trump's aides, you hear different things. There's some promises this week that these tariffs are going to end up actually kind of creating reciprocal tariffs that lower duties overall. That can't happen if Trump's other goal is to pay for his tax cuts with tariffs, which is what he also said. So it's the thing is, I think the bottom line here is, and this is again sort of perhaps not the best way to make economic policy, but it's a convenient answer to different Trump questions Trump wants to have an answer for.
Okay, I have a theory I'm going to share with everybody. Let me know what you think about this, and anybody should hit me up on Twitter or Blue Sky at Rick J. Newman if you think this is complete insanity. But so, okay, I went back to Trump's first presidency, 2018 and 2019. He imposed a bunch of tariffs then. They were, I think, Ben, you can correct me on this, but I think he's already imposed tariffs on more imports in 6 weeks than he did in all of 2018 and 2019. Okay, so that's the context. But so those tariffs were mostly on imports from China and steel and aluminum imports to the United States, and then a few other things. So there were 125,000 requests for exemptions from those tariffs. So, and some companies issued multiple requests for exemptions, and the Trump administration approved about 41,000 exemptions, or about 1/3 of the requests. So if you think about Trump's Commerce Department, is somebody connected with Trump is going to make a decision on, let's say we have this again, on 100,000 specific requests for exemptions from Trump. That means Trump is basically saying, I like this company, I hate this company. You're going to get favored treatment, you're going to get punished. I think what Trump likes about tariffs is it gives him an extraordinary amount of control over touch points in the economy, down to, make or break questions for some individual firms, including some medium and small ones. I think the big firms will weather this all okay. It's smaller firms, and there are inevitably will be some that just happen to be unusually vulnerable to cost increases from tariffs. So my theory is that Trump has figured out that he can exert an extraordinary degree of control over the economy by making these one-off decisions at a scale of 100,000 different times.
Yeah, and I think one timing thing for markets to watch here too is that I think there's a lot of truth to that, Rick, and that is I think it's expected to come into really strong force next month with reciprocal tariffs, because that's what Howard Lutnick calls the big transaction when they do reciprocal tariffs. Which even when you hear Trump's people talk about it, it's different for different countries, different for each sector. So it's all this negotiation that Trump is going to be able to do and sort of set it up sort of exactly the way in his mind he wants it to be. These tariffs, which will be very different depending on which sector you're in, depending on whether you can get on the phone with Trump to do it.
Okay, so let me put a question to both you guys, and Maddie, I'll go to you with this. You're talking to business people all the time on our shows. Is Trump going to back down? We have now seen the S&P 500 stock index. It is down 4.5%. Since Trump took office. That is not a global phenomenon. The stock index in China, in Europe, and even in Mexico is up, while our stock index is down. I wrote a story this week. The American exceptionalism trade, that is now dead. The U.S. is actually underperforming, not underperforming. Maddie, what are people telling you about whether they think Trump's going to back down at some point, or this is the way it's going to be for the next 4 years?
Well, what we're hearing from investors who first said he wasn't serious on the 25%, they're now saying, okay, well, it's not going to last that long. And I guess to their point on that, we have seen Trump capitulating on certain sectors like autos. But I guess they kind of revealed their playbook with Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent saying that what they were focused on was the 10-year yield being as low as possible. You got the real estate mogul in the White House wanting mortgage rates as low as possible. So they're focused on the 10-year, and they've gotten what they've wanted, right? We've had 2 months now of the 10-year yield getting lower.
You know what the best way to get the 10-year Treasury rate down? Maddie and I are looking at each other because we're actually sitting right next to each other. I can go into Maddie's screen here. Well, but here's how you get Treasury rates really down: is you cause a recession.
Yeah,
people are. I am now seeing people saying,
which is happening in the stock market, by the way.
Investment managers are saying, we have clients now who are asking us, is Trump actually trying to cause a recession? Is he doing this on purpose? I think before Trump came into office, we assumed he would never do that, because one of the most important report card metrics for Trump is how is the stock market doing and how is the economy doing. I think people are going back and saying, did we get that? Maybe we
Right.
got
Why did that
wrong.
change? Why did that change?
Well, did it? Or, I mean, is Trump just
Right.
playing a long game here? Or
Does he like
is
to
he kind
break
of
it
like,
then fix
don't
it?
worry, I know what I'm going to do in 2 months and stocks are going to go back up? Or
Right. I agree with that, Rick, that there's a sort of long-term gain here it's definitely underway when you talk to Trump folks about that. In the end, this will work itself out as a wash. Once we get our big tax cuts at the end of the year, that'll help balance some of this out. So if you kind of take the tough medicine now, a lot of this will work out in the long run. Whether that happens remains to be seen, but we've definitely got, as somebody put last week, a lot of veggies early on. The question is whether the dessert ever comes.
I wonder, too, how much people care about the sequencing that we've been talking about a lot. This idea that the first time around you had the tax cuts, you had your dessert first, and then you had your vegetable of the tariffs. And this time around, it's the opposite. Plus, the tax cuts aren't really going to be cuts anymore. It's just a continuation of a break that all of these companies already received. So I wonder how much we can expect that to be a lift to the stock market. Not so much anymore.
we're speechless. We have no idea. No, I mean, honestly, nobody knows.
Yeah. We have something to talk about all year, for sure.
We do.
Plenty to talk about.
I'll frame it a little differently. How are voters going to feel about Trump's performance on the economy? And I think he's flubbing it. I mean, we're seeing a little deterioration in the polls. He's not falling off a cliff. But what is happening is that people are hearing a lot about tariffs, and that generally has a negative connotation, and people are worried that we're going to get higher prices. So if we get higher prices, I think people are going to say, well, I associate higher prices with Trump's tariffs. And Trump is going to be sitting there saying, for as long as, way after the expiration date, it's all Biden's fault.
Yeah.
But I mean, once Trump has been in office for a couple of years, a couple of months, voters aren't going to say, oh, this is all Biden's fault. They're going to say, no, I voted for you for president because you said you would fix this problem. Why aren't you fixing it?
And we already had Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick this week saying the latest economic data is still a holdover from the Biden administration, but that is no longer true. We're getting monthly economic data. We are months into this administration. So this data that we are getting is under President Trump. We do have to take a quick break, but we're going to be right back with more right here on Capital Gains. Welcome back to Capital Gains. We are now joined by American Action Forum President and former Congressional Budget Office Director, Doug Holtz-Eakin. Doug, great to speak with you. Thanks for joining us. Listen, we've been talking about the totality of policy uncertainty under this administration. People are worried about their jobs. They're worried about inflation. How should our listeners be thinking about the near-term impact on their day-to-day lives of Trump's economic agenda?
Well, I mean, the first order impact is simply uncertainty, which tends to be bad for financial markets. We've seen some rocky days in the equity markets. Tends to be bad for business investment and hiring, and we've seen both of those have some modest evidence of slowing. And then the impacts past that are the real impacts. The costs are higher because of tariffs. Have to pass that along in the form of higher prices. That hurts consumer spending, hurts the business investment, and that starts giving you not just inflation but headwinds to growth. And then you're into territory that no one likes: rising prices, rising unemployment, bad combination.
Hey, Doug, appreciate you wearing the tie there and classing up the show. That's the good look for us. You're a budget expert. Can you just give us some perspective on what to pay attention to between what's happening in Congress with regard to the tax bill and spending cuts and what is happening with Doge, which is at this moment kind of a completely separate effort? Where is the action going to actually take place?
Well, there are two kinds of action. One action is on the tax front that is exclusively in Congress, and we have to see the extent to which the current tax code can be extended and the extent to which the president's many campaign promises will be honored by that process. They can't possibly honor them on, so we'll see what happens. Then there's the spending side. The Doge spending is really just personnel, with one wild card. And I think the magnitudes here matter. We spend about $350 billion a year on federal personnel. If they were to cut the workforce in half, and there are some places where they're trying to do things like that, we'd save $175 billion, which is real money in the real world, no question. But we had a deficit last year of $1.8 trillion. There is no solving our deficit and debt problems with the Doge effort. So it is going to reduce the federal headcount. That seems to be their objective, and not really make a dent in the problem.
What's
The
one wild card? Yeah, go ahead.
wild card is they are not paying some bills, right? There are things that they're saying, we're canceling that contract. We're not going to send out that foreign aid. They lost that battle in the courts. And that is an attempt to pick a legal fight over the 1974 congressional budget, which created my old shop, and Impoundment Control Act, which made it illegal for the president to not spend money that the Congress had appropriated. They are not spending money that the Congress has appropriated. And at some point, the Government Accountability Office is going to throw the flag and sue the president and say you have to spend that money. And this will go to the Supreme Court because they believe the president has that authority. And as a result, the law is unconstitutional.
Doug, one near-term thing on the impoundment question is the shutdown that's in a couple weeks. Do you think the government's actually going to shut down over this impoundment issue, which is the Democrats? That's what they're talking about. The reason they would block it.
Yeah, I mean, for clarity, they'll shut it down because they don't fund it for the remainder of the year. But the proximate cause are the activities of Doge and not spending money and firing these workers. And Democrats want to somehow rectify that in the spending bill, and they don't have a way to do that. I'd put the probability of that something like 35%. If you'd gone back a month, I'd put it at 0. So this is a real possibility, and I don't think it's in either side's best interest. No one wins these shutdown showdowns, but I can't rule it out.
I wonder how you're thinking about this report from the Congressional Budget Office, just finding that the CBO finding that we would need to cut Medicaid in order to hit the budget goals that the Trump administration has put forward here. How are you thinking about the reaction function of the public to a decision like that could lead to cuts to Medicaid coverage?
So a couple of things on that. It's a great question. Number one, this is the problem in using reconciliation. To do reconciliation, let's get fast track authority in the Senate and pass things on a party line vote. You first have to pass budget resolutions, and they contain only numbers. We're going to cut so much here. We're going to spend so much there. They don't say how. And so the Democrats have correctly filled the number that says Energy and Commerce will cut spending by $880 billion with people's worst fears. They're going to slash Medicaid, and they've told about the Republicans' targets on Medicaid. There's no Medicaid, that word, anywhere in the budget resolution. But that's the politics of doing this. It's bad news to pass budget resolutions because you get tagged with everything that the public dislikes. Once they start drafting the bill, the Republicans have the chance to make the case for the actual policy that's in the bill. And that is the good news part. If they have good policy, like there are some places where you can use Medicaid dollars on art classes, and they'll say, do we really want to spend Medicaid on art? No, we don't. And they'll have that fight. So there's some local politics to this. The bigger issue is Republicans, have a razor-thin majority as it is. They have a lot of seats in places that would be highly endangered from especially the centrists, from sharp spending cuts, for not taking care of the SALT cap, for things like that. And so the president's going to have to recognize this and realize that his power is threatened if they lose the midterms. And they may moderate the way that bill looks.
Doug, I want to ask you about sort of how this plays out in terms of the economy. One thing we're hearing a lot from different Trump folks this week is about measuring GDP differently, whether you exclude government data, which there is a measure of that there. There's also ideas out there that you kind of include good government spending but exclude bad government spending. I wonder what your thoughts are on that overall, and what the sort of level of worry you have on that. Do you think there's consequences of looking at sort of choose your own adventure in terms of the economic health? And do you think there's any fear of the Trump administration actually monkeying with the numbers?
Well, I certainly hope they don't change the basic national income and product accounts numbers, which have, for the record, been improved dramatically over the years, and where there are now additional presentations, satellite accounts for travel and tourism and things like that. So if there are things they're interested in, you can have additional presentations that shed light on them. But I see no reason to take anything out or somehow not collect data we are currently collecting. That's a valuable thing that the BEA does and should not be tinkered with. Um, if you want to make the case to measure things differently, sure, that makes sense. Everyone knows GDP is not the uniform best measure of welfare in the economy. That, sometimes when you have GDP go up because you're rebuilding from a storm, you actually lost and went behind. And so I understand all that, but it seems like a strange place to start to say, hey, we're going to have the greatest economy in the history of the globe, but we're going to have to measure it differently because you can't see it. That's not a great sales job.
Doug, we have to ask you about the national debt. We know it's going to go up under Donald Trump. There have been some wobbles in the Treasury market the last couple of years, or the last 18 months, suggesting maybe the national debt is finally getting too big. That does not seem to be what's the consensus right now. I've heard it both ways. I've heard the debt crisis is beginning, or alternatively, I've also heard, no, the Treasury can issue several $1 trillion more. There's plenty of room for that. What's your view? When is the national debt going to be too big?
I don't know is the honest answer. People ask me all the time, when does the sovereign debt crisis hit the United States? And I don't think it's imminent. I don't think it's within 5 years, 10 years. But the right answer is, I don't want to know the answer to that question. Why run the experiment? We would be much better off if we right now went after the root causes of our rising debt. We would crowd out less investment in the private sector. We would send more kids to get skills. We'd have a better workforce.
We're not doing any. We are running the experiment, aren't we?
Right.
I would like to stop then. If you say it's underway, I mean, honestly, it's not having a crisis. Right? Then people always say, look at Japan. They have tons of debt. They don't have a crisis. We're fine. Not having a crisis means you don't fail. That's called getting a D. I want to get something better than a D. And back when we had disciplined fiscal policy, 90s, early before the 21st century started, we got better economic performance. The standard of living doubled roughly every 26 years. Now it doubles every 56 years. And we had just a much better overall fiscal outlook. Go back to that. Have a plan for the federal debt that doesn't include just going up. It has only gone up in the 21st century. That's a serious indictment of the political leadership.
Maddie texted us a question while we're on the show. Should we end the podcast with something we're hopeful about? I mean, we're getting a D here. I mean, maybe next week.
Way to out me.
Maybe next week we'll be more hopeful.
Well, I was going to ask Doug. I was going to say, what might shift Trump's policies? Would it be the stock market tanking? Would it be the economic data? Doug, can you give us just a final answer, one sentence on that?
In the end, the economy is what matters, because it's what matters to voters.
Yeah.
His mandate on the economy. He needs to deliver on the economy. If he doesn't, he'll stop.
All right, Doug, thanks so much for joining us. We
Thanks,
appreciate it. We are all out of time, but thank you all for listening. Remember to like and subscribe to your Yahoo Finance podcast for more.